Well, hey everybody, welcome to this new edition of the Victor Marx Show. I've got a good friend as my guest, I'd say a colleague too, and a brother who's locked arms with me. And I've known him since he was young.
Just a kid,
Yeah,
mid-20s.
Look at you, you're all grown up. I'm so proud of you.
I even got facial hair now. I haven't had facial hair, and I can't
that's
see
what I'm
that out
looking
there.
at.
Yeah.
Your voice dropped, you're grown up. So Phil, I'm talking about Phil Darke. And Phil and his beautiful wife, Becca, they have 5 children. They live up in Folsom, California. And Phil received his Juris Doctor degree from Vanderbilt University School of Law here on a BA. Now, wait a minute. I literally have never heard of this. A BA in Rhetoric and Communications from UC Davis.
Yeah, so basically, Victor, just so you know, that's a BA in BS.
Okay, I was about to say.
There you go.
Wow. Hey, you could have paid me a quarter of it, and I would have given you a degree in BS.
Yeah, I know.
Cajun style. So, hey, before coming on board with, Providence as Research and Development Director, way back in 2008, Phil worked as an attorney with different law firms in the Sacramento area in Atlanta, Georgia. You even clerked for a federal judge in Honolulu. That's where we met.
Yes, it is.
Back in the day. Were you single then, or had you married your sweetie?
We were both single, and then we got engaged over there at Diamond Head, in fact. Yep, right there.
Love. So this is impressive. In 2014, you co-authored your first book, In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence. And you've been co-host of the Think Orphan podcast since 2016, which we're going to obviously talk about the book. But for those of you listening, man, I love Phil's warrior heart to say, why don't we challenge the status quo in the whole system of, orphan care globally. So in addition to that, I roped you in. You served on my board for over a decade, and you're a certified disc consultant, and this is pretty cool, ever adapting and overcoming and expanding and never being bored. During COVID, Phil, you started a new podcast, How Soccer Explains Leadership, and Coaching Character podcast. So you still got wheels on you, bro. You still can do the deal. And I'm glad you're turning you're a whole package, man. Mind, body, sex appeal. Watch out. Watch out. If y'all could just see what I'm looking at right now. He's a hunkosaurus behind a mic and is making a difference in this world. So welcome, Phil.
Hey, thanks, Victor. This is fun. I look forward to just sharing what God's doing, sharing what we've been able to do together. And just to see how we can help others. That's really what fuels me, is helping others to flourish. So what does that look like? It takes a lot of different forms. So thanks for having me on.
Of course. Now, tell us a little bit about, let's just go to core values. You teach family strengthening, right? And why is this so important?
Well, really, family is the start of a healthy society. I mean, at the end of the day, families are where you learn your identity. Families are where you're learning like you just talked about, your core values. It's where you're going to learn what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a husband, what it is to be a wife. If we don't have that, that's where you get societal breakdown. When you don't have strong family structure. And I mean, that firsthand.
Mm-hmm. But
what's that?
I mean, we're seeing it in the U.S.
Absolutely.
We have been.
Absolutely.
But it's just regardless of what country you're in?
It's not. It's anywhere you are. It's really, when you look even back in history, if you look at every civilization that was a healthy and a really a strong empire started as family being the center of that society. And as this family broke down, the society broke down. And look at any major empire. There's actually a great book called Family and Civilization. It's written back in the 1940s. And it talks about that very thing. highly recommend it. It's really more of a sociological book, so it's not really a read that you're necessarily going to stay up late at night reading. But it's fascinating to see how there's nothing new under the sun, right? So it's literally across every country, across every generation, across all of history. You see that when the family breaks down, society breaks down.
All right.
And so,
Well, no, I'm looking right now at my phone. I made a post on Instagram this morning, and it's New York Post had done the original. It says gay poly throuple makes history. They list three dads on a birth certificate. So it's three men holding a baby. And, I said, look, we can't legislate morality, but I think through key leadership, key political, solid influencers and stuff, we can legislate against immorality. Because this is the effect of a breakdown of our culture now where three men can all be dads. No mom. They adopt this baby, and nobody does anything about it. There's no outcry that causes challenge because of the concern. And on the contrary, there are many people that go, well, at least it's three loving dads. And it's like, well, nobody wants to take a look at the statistics. It's all assumption. There's no fact-based data that says this kid's going to be raised in a great home. And to me, it's actually really a form of child abuse, starting with just the confusion of what the family looks like. Well, I mean, when you hear that, when you see that was in your state, by the way, how does that make you feel?
Where do I even begin? I think that part of the problem we have going on right now is there is a hatred of truth, right? We have people saying, well, Victor, that's your truth, brother. That's your truth, that's not right. But my truth is that three dads is perfectly fine, because who am I to say that that's right or wrong? Because there's no moral center. There's no even anywhere close to a center. It's in fact that the quote-unquote right way to do things and the quote-unquote right side of history is that I can't tell you that anything that you think or do is wrong because that's your truth. And when we do that, that causes so many problems, right? There's no way. And the other thing about it, and we're going to get into this, you just got me on a soapbox. You can do that as well as anybody.
Get on there.
But I'm going to look at it and go, look, man, you and I talk about justice. You and I talk about let's be battling, and you hear about social justice. You hear about this justice, that justice. Everything's justice nowadays, right? And you and I, as much as anybody, are going to fight for justice. The problem is when you don't have truth, you can't have justice. Because
Bingo.
if you don't have a solid, absolute truth, then I can make anything justice. You can tell me, you and I are both advocates, and you and I are both fighting hard against trafficking. You and I are both fighting hard against to get children into loving families, to get children to be loved, to get children to know and that they are children of God and they can flourish and they have gifts and talents, they can do anything. But the problem is, if we don't have truth, if we don't have the ability to have truth, then we can't have justice. Those traffickers could say to people, hey, you know what? What I'm doing is justice. You know why? Because I'm helping people get jobs, and I'm helping the economy, and I'm fulfilling people's basic needs. And if we don't have truth, there's nothing we can say to them against that. There's
Agreed.
nothing we can say that makes that what they're doing wrong, because there is no right. And people will say, well, we just go with what society says. Well, you know what? Back a couple thousand years ago, Christians being fed to lions was what society said was okay.
Yeah.
And if you're going to give me that, anyway. So that's really that is something that I teach a class at university, and that's one of the first things we talk about is what is justice. And typically the students will come back with something like, well, it's righting the wrongs. It's making the wrong things right. And I said, okay, that's fine. Not a bad definition. What is right?
Ooh, there you go.
And we spent an entire class. We could spend an entire semester on that question.
I'm sure. I think about the father who was in a mental hospital that I talked to, and then there was a counselor there who was a psychologist telling me, Victor, there's a dad in here that actually took his biological daughter, virginity. and he believed it was the most responsible, safe, and respectful thing to do for his wife based on his truth of, well, what am I going to let some dude take it from her in the backseat of a car who doesn't care, going to hurt her feelings? Some guy that might give her an STD, someone that might, get her pregnant and she has to get an abortion. It boils down to this, and that's why our country is struggling. And I would say, one step further, I think the church is struggling. I'm having a conversation with a young man who, if I said his name, people would know him on the radio. He's a Bible teacher, and he's a younger guy, very popular. And I asked him this, Phil. I said, hey, how are you counseling your generation and younger regarding same-sex issues? And he goes, well, actually, I don't really delve into that. I said, but you're a pastor of a church, and you're a very popular speaker. You've got radio, you're on television. Do you just not address it? And this is what he said. People, listen to this. He goes, I look at Jesus' example, and he never discussed it, even though he knew leaders at the time were gay or bisexual. So if he didn't address it, I'm not. And then, of course, I got to press in. And I just said, okay, so just tell me, at least we agree on, is homosexuality, according to the Bible, a sin when it's acted upon? And he goes, I can't say that. He would not say it. He would not. And I just went, and people would be surprised because he's on radio stations all over the country in Christendom. So I think that the church, this is what's sad. You can go to other countries, and I'll just say the Middle East. And even though there are different countries with, say, Islam, and there's extreme versions, there are sets of morality that are higher and better understood as simple truth in Islam. And, and look, I'm a born-again, evangelical, conservative, red-blooded American. I mean, I'm wearing a T-shirt with a blue stripe and a camo hat right now, with a scripture. So I'm just telling you, it's pretty odd to go to other countries and realize, wow, they actually do appreciate better, marriage between a man and a woman, and actually women keeping their virginity until marriage. I mean, again, nothing perfect about it, but I'm just talking about a moral dilemma that we're having in Christendom. So,
well, and I would say too, Victor, a big part of that is we just assume that pastors know the Bible.
Uh-oh. Wait a minute.
Right?
What are you?
And
Stop it.
I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't know if that's a safe assumption. I think we need to study the Bible, and I think part of the big problem too is, I'm not pointing at any pastors. I'm not saying the pastors don't, and I'm not judging them. I'm just saying, look, why are we making that assumption? And the problem is most people can't know whether that's true in any given Sunday, any given sermon, because they themselves haven't studied Scripture. You have professing Christians who have never read the Bible. You have professing Christians who have never studied Scripture. And look, I'm not here to say I'm a perfect guy, and I know I'm not, because I have read the Scripture, and I know that all have fallen short of the glory of God. Not some might be able to make it. Not it's possible. I also know Romans 1 talks about exactly what you're talking about, that people will do things that are absolutely beyond the pale because they lose their first love. They lose their focus on what the actual truth is. And that's a lot of what we see happening going on right now. Now, I will say, to go into what you talked about, people talk all the time, hey, what would Jesus do? Look, Jesus never did this. Just love Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I want you to go to the towards the end of Matthew and read about woe to the Pharisees. There's an entire chapter of Matthew. I believe it's Matthew 23, but I don't have my Bible in front of me right now. But it might be 24, but it's right before what everyone goes to in Matthew 25 that is absolutely true as well.
Yeah, you know where the neighborhood is. You just may not know the address.
Yeah, but anyway, all that to say, it's woe, it's woe, it's woe. And I'm not here to say, look, we need to come down on everyone. I just want to say, if you're going to go to that, Make sure that you're going to the whole picture. Make sure that you're not picking and choosing and going to just your proof text for your position. We got this whole Bible that talks about all these things, and if we're not clear on that, it goes back to your first question about, family and fathers. Well, the Bible's very clear on what it looks like. It doesn't say family is XYZ, but it's very clear what husband's role is, what wives' role are, what the family role is, how we are to treat our children, that it is between man and woman, that marriage and that connection is intended to be. Those are things that are very clear. And look, I'm not here to condemn anybody. That's not my job. My job is to say, look, I'm the messenger. And you look out throughout Scripture about the prophets throughout Scripture, they weren't the most popular people in the world. They weren't guys who were going, sweet, I get to be a prophet. They were going, oh, man, really? I mean, here I am, send me, but I don't know if I want to do this, man. This is brutal. I mean, look at Jonah. Great example. By the way, worst sermon in history of the world, and he converted an entire city that he didn't even want to. So that gives us hope, right? But I think that's something that you and I think both are the prophecy, and I'm not saying, like, don't hear me, folks. Don't hear me saying, oh, I'm like Isaiah. But prophet being that it's a disruptor. It's someone to come in and say, look, I'm just a messenger. I'm just one who's going to read Scripture. I'm going to want to say, look, this is how I read it. Now, I'm not going to tell you that, I'm not to tell you how to read it. I'm just going to say, how are you going to get around what it says in Scripture about homosexuality, what it says about adultery, what it says about murder isn't just killing somebody, but it's killing someone in your heart. Like, I'm just the messenger on that, right? I have great friends who are homosexual. I have great friends who have committed adultery.
Here.
I have great friends
Yeah.
who are all these things, right? And I will say to them, and I have had conversations with people to say, look, I'm just the messenger here, and I want you to know, because I care about you, because I love you, if this truly is sin and I don't tell you that, then what kind of friend am I?
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
no, thank you. We're tracking, and again, for those listening, if you speak truth in love, not truth that you're using to hack people with, but just truth in love, you're going to get haters. You're going to get resistance, and count on no joy. Don't think that you're in the center of God's will if you get no grief, if you get no pushback. You'd actually have to really wonder, are you being effective as being a light in darkness and salt on the earth? Now, we've seen the end result of the lack of fatherlessness in America, and I remember that first time you went with me up to a youth prison in Ohio. You remember that?
I do, of course.
What was that like for you?
It was an experience I will never forget. I mean, for a few reasons. One, as I said to you after that, I don't think I've ever seen someone more in their wheelhouse than I saw you that day with those young men and women. I believe it was in the middle of Ohio. After we were serving on an advisory board together, and you're like, hey, let's go to a youth prison together. It's like, all right, sure, what the heck? And so we went in there, and we kind of sat to the side and watched you do your thing. Well, what I saw there, it confirms so much of what I had studied. It confirm so much of what I had done, to see the results, as you said, of fatherlessness, to see the results of a society that's so broken and does not pour into our children in the way that we need to pour into our children. But it also showed me that the impact of just some love, some truth in love to these kids as well. I remember you walking into that room and seeing some of the hardest people. They were just hardened, man. And you come in there and and they're like, who are you, white boy? Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're this, compared to a lot of them, you were this lanky little white dude who was coming in, who was going to tell them something. What? Really? There's no way, right? And I think that goes to all of us, right? Don't judge a book by its cover, and don't, think that we know everything, right? I think that we all have something to learn from that when we go into any situation. And I think that to be able to come in there and then you basically disarm them with some of your, like literally with the gun, I think the martial arts stuff, but disarm them from you connected with them, right? You met them where they were. And going back to what we just talked about, I think that that's a great lesson for all of us. I'm not saying that we come in and we're holier than thou. We're not, and you weren't there. You were like, hey guys, I understand you. Here's my background. Here's where I am. And we can learn from the Apostle Paul there too. He went in and he was all things to all people. So you're able to go in and connect with those people where they were, and then be able to speak truth into their life to say, look, you're way more than you think you are if you're thinking that all you are is somebody who's in this prison. Right? And that's what we can do in different ways around the world as we are working with different people, is not to come in from a position of superiority and not to come in from a position of we are better than you, we know more than you, we are at a different position than you because of XYZ, because we made more money, because we're in the suburbs, because we were born in California or in the United States or whatever. No. We are all created in the image of God. We are all human beings who can do amazing things. And so that's effectively the message. Now, I don't remember the exact words you said, but what I do remember is that when we came in, we had all these hardened youth who would done things that I can't even imagine. At the end of it, I saw maybe one or two people in the room who were still like, is that all you got? But for the most part, they were weeping.
Yeah.
They were crying. We were too. You were too.
Yeah, it was the power of God, right?
It was
the move on their hearts.
It was unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, so moving from that, which was an incredible, seeing what God did, what can you recommend to our listeners right now? How do we get to the core of the problem, which I would say one of it is mentoring men to become everything God has called them to do, to kind of stop this crazy cycle of fatherlessness? What is, we don't have a lot of time on this one, but I mean, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, what I said, I told you I teach a university course. One of my questions in almost every exam is, and this gives it away if you listen in and you're going to take my course someday, but that's okay. It's if we could just train up men to be godly men, we would alleviate most of the orphan crisis in the world. Do you agree or disagree?
Agreed.
And if you don't agree, I don't think you understand it. Now, most of the objection I get is, well, you need to train up women to be godly women too. And I said, yeah, of course you do. But the thing is, if a godly man is being a godly man, he will love the women in his life, he will, particularly his wife, as Christ loves the church. But if he's raising up his girls to be godly women, if he's a godly man, he will raise up his girls to be godly women. He will raise up his boys to be godly men. He will go into the fore of his community and to be able to do whatever he can to help people understand and know that they are children of God and they can do amazing, they have amazing gifts and talents, right? He will be able to speak that truth into situations. He will study his Bible. He will be praying. He will know these things. So that's something that the breakdown of society, again, is breakdown of family. Breakdown of family goes to men not being men. As Matt Chandler often will say, that your little boys. There's a lot of grown little boys. I've heard you say similar things. And that's the thing, is how do we get these boys to be men? Because if they're not men, then you're going to have girls that don't know their identity, and they're going to, there's places in India and other places around the world, in Thailand, Cambodia, where you see dads, and I don't call them dads, I think they don't earn the title of dad, telling their little girls that they need to go and be prostitutes so they can pay bills in the family.
Right. It's unbelievable.
And you've seen that. I mean, we know the Cambodia work that you're doing.
Yeah.
That I went and visited some of those people over there, that I saw these girls who were just rescued out of those places, and they were dead to the world.
Yeah.
Now, I also saw girls 3 years out. But anyway, all that to say, that comes from men not being men. And if we can train that up, then I think that will take care of a lot. Because here's the deal. If we can strengthen families, then we have less need for adoption, less need for foster care, less need for orphanages, less need for anti-trafficking work, because dads aren't doing that. Men are being men. Right. And so we have mentoring. If we see mentoring, here's the deal. You just talked about that. Train up men to be men as mentors. What we do on the Think Orphan podcast is really show the interconnectedness of all these different things. All those things I just mentioned, from family strengthening and poverty alleviation to anti-trafficking work and mentoring, adoption, foster care, orphanages, all of it's interconnected. If we can strengthen families, we'll have less need for anti-trafficking work. If we can mentor men to be... If we can mentor these boys in a way, and these girls as well, to say, hey, what we're doing here is not fixing you. What we're doing here is preemptive family strengthening. We are helping to strengthen your future family by training you up to know what it means to be those roles, know what it means to be a husband, wife, father, mother. That's something that is so critical because that will change the way we do all these things. But if you don't see it as interconnected, you won't do that.
Phil, this is too rich to try to wrap right now. So I've got to ask you, can we do another show?
Of course.
Because I think this is a two-part. I want to get into James 1:27, that religion is pure and undefiled before the Father. And it's to visit, I mean, orphans and widows in their affliction. And you have such a big heart for orphans and what your ministry is doing and in the pursuit of orphan excellence, that book. I want us to talk about that because there are people very interested. They know the problem, but they want to make a difference and be part of the solution. So hang on. We're going to do part 2. I want you that are listening to join us again tomorrow for the second part of this interview with my friend and colleague, Phil Darke. It's powerful what he's doing, and he really will give you insight into how we can, as Christians and people listening to this right now, make a big difference, both in the U.S. and overseas.